Blake LeVine, and today I want to give an overview of an educational documentary to talk about depression. So, I've worked for many years, first as a psychotherapist doing counseling in a practice, helping many families, individuals, couples, business owners, and children. And then for several years, I worked in Los Angeles doing coaching, running support groups, and helping those that face mental health conditions. I've also written a number of books teaching about mental health. A couple of the books I've written that have been published include Beating Bipolar, Depression, Bipolar, and Heroin, The Psychology of Adult Coloring, and the upcoming book, The Depression Diet. And in this documentary talk today, I want to share some of the lessons that I have found are vital for anyone with depression. Number one is that it is not your fault. I have found that those with depression often blame themselves, thinking that they are the main cause of the problem. They use examples of things that have happened. Maybe they had a business and it failed. Maybe they were in a relationship and it didn't work out. Maybe they were struggling to see success or happiness, and they often blame themselves. And what I have found with those I work with is that this is really the wrong answer. We all go through things, and oftentimes failure is not our fault completely. A few examples could be the condition of the market you're in, right? If you're offering a product or service, maybe it's not a time that type of product or service is needed. It could also be in a slowing or down economy, very hard to see success. There may be a number of competitors that have advantages. It can also be that maybe whatever, if you were in a relationship, it wasn't meant to work out, or the other person had a different idea of what they wanted. So the first thing I want to say is not to blame yourself for what has happened, because when we grow angry and upset with ourselves, it makes dealing with depression even harder. The second step I want to talk about is that we often have this attitude that it's wrong to admit that we're sad. And, I look on Facebook and see everybody sharing beautiful pictures and adventures, and that's wonderful. But for someone that's depressed, it can be really hard to see everybody else looking like their lives are awesome when the depressed person is feeling upset and sad and doesn't know what to do. Because on the one hand, they see Facebook and that they should express how great life is, but they're not really feeling that way. So when I talk to people about this, I suggest that they can be quiet. Maybe they don't want to share their feelings openly in the public. That's a great thing. You don't have to tell everyone you knew that you're having a hard time. But you also have to know that those that are seemingly doing well maybe have their own problems. Some might be struggling in their own lives, but they just put up positive things so that it looks like their life is a lot better than it actually is. And the third thing I want to talk about is being able to say, you know what, I need some type of support. So I also have found that, for a long time I did therapy and coaching, and I always thought that was the right answer, right? If you're struggling with depression, you go and you see a therapist. But over a number of years, I've started to look that all of us are different, and when we come from all types of backgrounds, we may have different ways of dealing and processing with our emotions. So here's some ways that you could deal with depression. One is to go see a therapist. That could be a psychologist or a social worker, and talk to them about your moods. Most of them will help you do behavioral things that will allow you to feel better. They'll give you an outlet to vent your feelings and frustrations. So that's one option. Second option is a psychiatrist. These are medical doctors, people that have went to medical school and are trained both in the mind and the body. Often the psychiatrist will take a list of questions to find out about your background to see if you do have depression. They then often use different type of medications to help you figure out ways to get better. So that is another possibility. Third one is for some in religious backgrounds. They believe that having a discussion with whether it be a pastor or preacher, whether it be some type of support within their church or whatever religious organization they belong to, they feel that that's the way to help them. And I have learned in my own life this can be helpful, and I think that we can benefit from going to a church or whatever religion we're involved in and have their support to deal with the depression. That's definitely very valid, and for a lot of us that can make a positive difference. The fourth step I can say is that you can do alternative types of things. I meet a lot of people that don't want to traditionally get help, but they find other, whether it's spirituality or types of activities that help them with their mind. I'm not an expert on that, but I have heard examples of people saying, hey, it's really helped me. And after all of those things, those are the best ways to get help. There's also free support. So there's a National Suicide Prevention Hotline. You can call them anytime. They will offer free assistance. They have people there to listen 24 hours a day. There's also support groups, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have support groups in most communities in the U.S. You can go to their website, the NAMI.org, NAMI.org, and they will give a list of them. There's also the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance, also known as DBSA. They too give support groups where you can go and meet other people that are facing depression or other mood issues and connect. And the best thing about NAMI and DBSA is they're both free, so you can attend their meetings and meet other people. They also do walks. So I've done a few times here in Florida the NAMI walk, where people get together and walk to raise money to support that organization. It's really fun. You meet a lot of other people and you spend a day taking a long walk to raise money. This is part 2 of the depression educational documentary. So earlier I shared some information about what you can do if you have depression, but in this part of this talk I want to share about depression at work or school. So one of the most difficult things with depression is, even though you have it, you still have to keep going with your life. And if you're a student or you're working, what do you do when you're feeling depressed but you have to keep going and either go to school or work? Now, my suggestion for this is, if you are in a work or school setting, that you are getting help. So if you're working with someone to support you while you're facing the issues, that's very important. And I think that when you are depressed, it feels so hard to do work and be productive. But I find that if you actually are able to do things and you put in your best effort each day, you end up feeling better. And I have found in my own experience, days where I would sleep all day when I was sad or depressed, I end up feeling way worse. And I, at the end of the day, think to myself, why didn't I do more? Or why was I just lazy? And I think in your own life, if you're in school or working, that when you put in a full day, you're going to end up feeling better about yourself, and it may actually help your depression. If it is too severe and you're really having a hard time, taking some time off is not a bad idea, but I would talk to your doctor before you make that decision. It's often helpful to have assistance figuring that part of it out. I also find that we can have good and bad days, and even those without depression will have those times. Sometimes they're having a rough day, sometimes it's rainy and brings down their mood. So give yourself a little bit of flexibility and don't ask yourself to be perfect at all times, because that's not a realistic way of living. And I want to finish this documentary talking about why there is some positive parts of actually having depression. And I've had people say to me, well, what's good about this? How can it be positive to be depressed or to feel down or to really be struggling? And I want to take some time to explain my thought on that. So I was reading a study where they talked about those that had faced adversity, and you would think that facing severe adversity or trauma would actually make their lives worse and that they would have more problems. But the study proved that people that had been through trauma sometimes end up doing better in their lives because they learn to be resilient and they learn to keep going, and going through the hard experience makes them stronger mentally. And it's a very fascinating thing, because sometimes we would think that going through a hard time would only be negative, but it can actually help us. We can develop different abilities and gifts that we didn't know we have. And I think that's really a wonderful thing to think about. Maybe the depression you're going through now is going to, in the long run, make you stronger and healthier. If you could survive that dark time, you could probably survive anything. And I'll share in my own life, it's been so helpful to go through adversity. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in my teens. I spent 2 years in and out of 5 psychiatric hospitals. I faced my brother dying of a heroin overdose about 3 years ago. My wife had a very dark depression. So those things that seem really tragic in the long run have been very good in teaching me how to go slow, to take things one day at a time, to be able to say, what can I be grateful for today? So think about that. The next time you're feeling sad and depressed, maybe all this dark, difficult stuff will one day lead you to a very bright light place. And I want to share that when I was so sick with bipolar and in the mental hospital, I said, this is horrible. There's no way this can all turn out good. This is only a horrible thing in my life. I had been successful before being diagnosed, and it looked like I lost everything. But in the long run, it taught me to go slow and steady with my goals. It allowed me to think about how I treat people, to look at myself on a deeper level, to see if I am a good human being, what I can improve on. And I found that even the darkness of being diagnosed with a mental illness could teach me things. And now here I am about 21 years later, and I've written all these books to teach. I've done a lot of talks and shared my lesson here on YouTube in almost 600 videos. So what ended up seeming like the worst time in my life led to some positive things. And I hope in your own journey and experience with depression that it gets better, that things get more positive for you. I'll leave the talk with this, that through it all, I had to develop a faith in God to lean on during the hard times. I found when my brother died that drinking alcohol or getting high would not be a good way to escape the feelings. So being able to have a relationship with God was a very positive step for me to move forward and to get through some very dark challenges. I'm not here to preach to you about what you should do, but I do believe, like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, that having belief in a higher power can maybe help you when times are really hard. So I leave you with that today. I wish you an amazing, positive rest of your day or evening where you are, and I hope you'll maybe check out some of the videos we hear on YouTube to teach and educate. And I'm going to put my links below for my books. My new book, The Psychology of Adult Coloring, comes out October 2016, and my depression book, The Depression Diet, comes out January 2017. And thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video.